Hello and welcome back to the official Scottish Rugby podcast. On the show this week, we're joined by the National Clinical Director of the Scottish Government, Professor Jason Leitch, plus our very own Performance Director, Jim Mallinder. Well, delighted to have on the official Scottish Rugby podcast today Professor Jason Leitch, who is the National Clinical Director for the Scottish Government. Jason, thank you very much for joining us here on the podcast. Now, before we jump into the more serious issue and detailed issue around COVID-19, I thought we'd talk a little bit about rugby. Now, I know you've been to BT Murrayfield a few times to watch the game, but just talk us through the game itself and do you follow it?
I follow it pretty closely, actually. I have to say, sport is easier for me to follow than play. Pretty much any sport you could mention, and rugby as well. But I'm a keen fan. I live very close to Scotstoun, so I'm often at the Warriors of an evening. If they're doing very well, I can't sometimes get in because all these other people suddenly arrive. So I tend to go a bit casually. But I've had a season pass at Murrayfield for the last decade, maybe. I sit up high in the West Stand. And I love it, actually. I really like it. And in recent years, the highs and lows have been a bit more prominent. So not just, I was an Airdrie football fan as a boy, so I've learned what hope is and hope to be dashed. And Scotland Rugby was maybe a wee bit like that in Mr. Kellogg's time, but I think more recently, they've given me a little bit more to celebrate. So I love it. I absolutely love it.
You mentioned earlier on when we were chatting, your dad played a wee bit. He was a hooker at Dunfermline High, did you say?
He did. He played in Fife when he was a boy. He was a coal miner. All my family were coal miners before me. My grandfather, who I never knew, died in the mine, and my dad's elder brother. And he played. He's a wee bulky, stocky little fella now in his late 70s and protected from COVID. But he was a hooker at high school. He says it was the only thing he ever did right at high school. And then subsequently taught engineering at a college not far from here. A kind of self-made man. But yes, so rugby, we love it. We love it.
You get along with him sometimes? He joins you at Scotstoun?
Yeah, so he sometimes, because the train, you'll know, Ali, that the train comes along to Hindland. He gets the train from Airdrie, gets off, we meet him, and then we walk to Scotstoun. He absolutely loves it. Partly, I mean, he likes the rugby, but it's partly because he gets pies without my mother giving him into trouble for pie eating.
I see.
There's some snacking goes on at Scotstoun.
Did you play rugby in school at all, or what sports did you play growing up?
Yeah, only casually at school when you were forced. And I went to Edinburgh Academy, so the only sport at Edinburgh Academy was very bad football. So it wasn't a great history. I shouldn't even tell this story. We got a new PE teacher who arrived and he was actually Scotland's volleyball coach, but that wasn't a huge accolade at the time. There was about 16 people played volleyball in the whole country. And started playing volleyball. That was the only team I ever got in, because it was only because 6 boys turned up and they needed 6 boys. So competitive sport, I have to tell you, was never really I was never going to make my living at it, that's for sure.
Well, a lot of our supporters listen to this podcast who are rugby fans, but also sports fans as well, like yourself, Jason. And I think just to start and kick off the podcast, can you just give us the current advice for those supporters around COVID-19?
Yeah, so to sound serious for a moment or two, we're in week 7 or 8 of lockdown. We don't particularly like the phrase because we didn't want to do it to the country, but this new virus, remember, it's only existed since December. So we're learning every single day about how it works, how dangerous it is, and it's a nasty virus. It's really horrible, particularly for that vulnerable community, the elderly, people with pre-existing conditions. So the advice fundamentally is in 3 words. It's stay at home. So the present advice is that the best defence against this virus is your front door. Now, that's not going to be forever, and there are green shoots of hope in some of the data we're getting from intensive care admissions and admissions to hospital. And the virus numbers are falling, but it's still far too early for us to release anything significant. You can see this week we've begun to talk about some more outdoor exercise. Other parts of the UK are opening outdoor shops and stuff. But fundamentally, it's stay at home. If you go out, and if other people come in and out a bit for the essential reasons, medicines, work, caring for other people, then the fundamental public health advice is wash your hands. And wash your hands pretty much obsessively. So wash your hands with soap and water. Keep away if you're outdoors for about 2 meters from person to person if you possibly can. Outdoors it's pretty tricky to catch it outdoors. It's much, much more of a risk indoors and in poorly ventilated areas like houses or offices or care homes, as you've seen so drastically in the news in the last few weeks. So that, I'm afraid, is the advice. And we hope that'll change over the next weeks. But the advisors like me telling the decision makers, we are very cautious.
Jason, you mentioned there other parts of the UK. One big talking point that's been probably more so since the weekend is the fact that there's different messaging for different areas within the UK. Do you believe that will be the norm moving forward, or is it likely to move back towards more of a collective voice?
I think the fundamentals will stay the same. I mean, the virus is the virus. The virus it's no respecter of ethnicity or country or border or even age to catch it. It particularly likes the elderly to make them very sick, but all ages catch it and all ages carry it. So we're going to have to be careful. And the advisors, so tonight, every Tuesday and every Thursday in the evening, the clinical and scientific advisors meet across all 4 nations. And we decide, or we talk about what we might do with the shielded group, or what diseases we should put in the high-risk group, or how we might think about coming out the other end. And that advice is pretty collective. I mean, that doesn't look that different across the nations. What looks a wee bit different is where we are on the curve of the virus. So the northeast of England is in a different place from London, and Belfast's in a different position to Edinburgh. So there might be nuance. So there might be slight differences, and you can see that this week even in the Welsh saying we're going to open garden centres, recycling centres, but it's not massive difference. I mean, they're not putting the schools back next Tuesday. So I think there will be staging differences, but fundamentally the thing will stay together. And I think that'll probably be true of elite and recreational sport as well. That there might be slight timing differences, but in the main, we'll try and do that as a 4-nation effort.
One change you did make was to allow people to go outside a little bit more. So to go outside and exercise with members of their own household. Now, I imagine that's twofold, is it, Jason? That's physical well-being, but it's also mental well-being. The more we can get people outside, because we have been in this period of lockdown for a reasonably prolonged time. So you're encouraging people now to get outside within their own household and taking a wee bit more exercise. And
we were careful at the beginning of the whole thing. Some countries didn't add exercise to their exclusive list. So we had 4 reasons to leave the house: medicines and supplies, so bread and milk, you're shopping, caring for other people. But we also added exercise. And some countries didn't do that. So in Spain, you weren't allowed out at all from your house, unless you happen to have a garden. So Scotland doesn't all have 3-bedroom villas with a nice garden out the back with a water feature. A lot of Glasgow lives in high-rise apartments, single-parent families, 3 kids, an autistic teenager. I mean, so getting out is not just for joggers and cyclists, which is terrific, but it's also just about getting families outdoors, burn off some energy with the kids. And we've now extended that to you're able to do that more than once. We still want you to do it local to your house and inside your own household. And they will be things that probably change over the next little while. Remember, every trip outdoors adds a little bit of risk to the whole population. Even if you are careful, if we let everybody out, there's going to be risk to the whole population. That's the difference between individual healthcare and population health. The country is having to learn what we all learned at public health school when we went, about the difference between that individual asthma inhaler that you take and a population level measure like stay in the house. So these are 2 different forms of healthcare. So gradually we'll be able to release that. But you're absolutely right. The outdoors thing is about physical health, about keeping you well, but also is clearly about your mental health and getting a bit of a break and clearing your mind.
Jason, there's no doubt your meetings all the time, meeting with people in different parts from around the country and the world. And one of the meetings that Scottish Rugby had last week with Scottish Government was with the sporting bodies. Can you just talk a little bit more about what was presented in that meeting and some of the talks that took place?
Yes, there was a couple of big events last week that Mr. Fitzpatrick, the Minister for Sport, attended, and I supported him a little bit as the advisor. There was one with a huge number of sports. And then there was one with rugby, football and horse racing that we spent a bit of time with your leaders, the SFA, the SPFL, and the horse racing community to think about the layers of your sport. So your sport isn't all Murrayfield. Your sport is grassroots schools rugby, is people playing rugby in the street. It's all that up to the elite, the men's and women's teams at Murrayfield and your club teams. So we talked about what that might look like. We of course, I'm not going to give you the exclusive of the date when everything's coming back, and we didn't in that call either. It was a very mature, very sensible conversation about what would have to happen and when in order to get these sports back. And the sports are all slightly different in the way they're funded and financed. So football, we had to have a conversation about TV revenue versus gate receipts, how much money's in the bank, what does Brecon do compared to what Celtic can do, and then rugby the same. What would be the plan to get elite rugby back, but also what would be the plan to get touch rugby back or schools rugby back or whatever that might look like. And those conversations, honestly, they're not that different from getting the coffee shops back or the garden centres back. It's about safety of workers and safety of customers.
Jason, regardless of the timelines, one thing that is clear is it will be a staged return, and that staged return will be based on the health advice from yourself and your team, as well as from our point of view, the kind of physical return that the players need to go through, the pre-season training, if you like. How important is it? And I know Scottish Rugby talked very much about that staged return and tried to put some plans in place that could continue to move us forward over the next few months. But how important is it that Scottish Rugby and government are liaising as much as practically possible to get us moving forward?
So we're really keen to do that. It's one of the reasons for communicating today is precisely that. I think the individual sector, whether you're oil and gas or Scottish Rugby, have a responsibility to do some of that work themselves, to look across the world and say what's happening in New Zealand or what's happening in Dubai, and think about what the best practice might be. And then the Scottish Government has a responsibility to say, here's the high-level guidance, here's what we think is required for safety, for public health, and eventually we've also got a responsibility to give you times for that. We can't do that yet, but eventually we're going to have to do that. And then it's then your responsibility to link those two things together. We, in the sports section of the Scottish Government, will probably then have to take a view about whether we think your plan is good, bad, could you do this over here, all of that. And I think that's the only way to do it. It's the same conversation I had last week with the STUC about getting workers back to work in whatever sector they happen to be, whether they're in furloughed environments in the tax office or whether they're working in factories and manufacturing, making shortbread. So they have to come up with a plan for their shortbread factory. Is it plastic sheeting? Is it alcohol gel on the way in and out the door? Is it staggered shifts? And I think rugby and other sports will have to think about what that looks like. And I was very impressed with the plan, the provisional draft plan that your guys came with to that meeting last week. 5 stages. I was slightly surprised, Al, if I'm totally honest, that it takes 10 weeks to get a rugby player back. What are they doing? And are they just eating fish suppers? I mean,
I tell you, Chris Patterson and I were talking about it just last week. The guys now are far, far more advanced in their own personal training than we would have been if this had happened 10, 15 years ago. 8 to 10 weeks for a player to get through a pre-season. Jason, I think probably the main point is it's getting your body to a physical condition that's good, and then there's getting your body to be able to play a professional game
at elite level.
Yeah, you just like you can't simulate a live breakdown. You can't simulate a live scrum. And let me tell you, as you get a little bit older in the career, 10 weeks might be, for some of the guys who are the wrong side of 30. Some of the guys at 21 would come back.
Might be a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end of my career, it could have been 3 months.
There was some suggestion that the footballers would get back quicker, and then there was a bit of a fight about who was the hardest. And I didn't enter into it.
I won't enter into the football rugby debate either, Jason. I mean, clearly there's one sport that will take a bit longer to get ready for because it's a much tougher sport. But we'll let our audience decide who that is.
Yesterday, Jason, we went out on our social media channels and we asked our fans to get in touch with any questions that they'd like us to ask you. First question I want to ask you is this. When a vaccine is eventually available, will it be administered at medical practices in the most vulnerable to society first?
Probably. We don't know if we'll even get one, but if we get one, we'll have to start with the most vulnerable who need it most. However, there's a compromise there that viruses are tested first in the healthy, of course, because less risk. So it may be that we have to test this for longer before we can give it to the 79-year-old with COPD or the person with leukemia, because we just need to be certain that we're not going to cause more harm than good. Vaccines are not paracetamol. You know, there's a risk always. So your instinct would be get it to the protected group, because that's what we do with the flu vaccine, to protect the very vulnerable.
Another question that's came in, Jason, is if you just tell us, what is the R number at Scotland at the moment?
We don't know accurately. The R number is really, really difficult at a public health level to measure. It's the reproduction rate. So it's the number, if I have the virus, it's the number of people I would infect. So this virus in the wild is 3. So every individual gives it to 3 others, roughly, and that causes exponential rise. One person gives it to 3, those 3 give it to another 3, those 3 give it to another 3. You're at 46,000 before you know where you are. If it's below 1, you give it to fewer than one person on average, and therefore the graph falls. So we know the graph is falling, so we know it's below 1. We don't think it's much below 1. We think the scientists, the boffins, tell me that it's somewhere around 0.7, 0.8, and that's good. The difference between 0.7 and 0.8 doesn't really matter to us. What we need is it below 1, so that the graph, instead of going up, the graph comes down. But it's a slowdown, because everything happens in 3 weeks with this virus. Incubation period, sickness. You don't get the virus today and die tomorrow. You get the virus today and die in 6 weeks. So the people who have got the virus today got it during lockdown. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we need to be careful and slow on the way out.
Another question, just back to rugby, is if the autumn tests go ahead in November, do you foresee these to take place behind closed doors?
I think it's too early to say. I honestly do. I mean, if you said they were in July, I'd say no crowds, probably. November, I just don't know what will happen. There's too many variables. We might have treatment by then. We probably won't have a vaccine by then, although some of the real optimistic scientists think we might have. Most of the balanced ones think it'll be into the new year. But there are 300 vaccine trials happening in the world today. 2 of them are at phase 2 trials, which is human trials. But then there's a whole lot of stages after that. So most of them will fail. That's what normally happens. So I would have thought it's too early to say what will happen in November. There's a lot of variables there about international travel, a lot of variables there about crowd, about getting people up to. I would be disappointed if we didn't have elite sports people happening by then. I just don't know how we'll then do that with TV, crowd, everything else.
You mentioned, Jason, there also the ability to get the groups training again. I know that last week the role of BT Murrayfield was discussed, and the potential that could have a significant role moving forward from the vast kind of campus that it's got, and the outdoor space from players being able to get straight out their cars, straight onto the park, so the need for using changing facilities isn't there. Even to the point where you've got one point of entrance, one point of exit, so you can monitor who's going in and out. Do you believe that will have a big part to play getting us back to some degree of normality? I
think at an appropriate moment that will. I think football stadia, rugby stadia, kind of locations, whether it's Scotstoun, Murrayfield, whatever it happens to be, I think will become important. You could even argue that you should. So what we've done at the SEC, you'll have noticed, is when we built the Louisa Jordan Hospital, we also took over the hotels. So we've had staff staying in that bio bubble, protected. No virus in, no virus out. So you could imagine a world where the testing gets a bit faster. We're not there yet scientifically, not because we can't afford it, just because the science isn't there yet. But the science is moving every day. The test we use today isn't the test we used 6 weeks ago. It's now faster. So eventually we'll have faster tests. You could get everybody in that environment, train, etc., etc. You'd know you were virus free, nobody in and out, separating probably players and coaches and medical teams from everybody else. And I think there is a world in which that could be part of the solution coming out the other end. It's not sustainable for long, though. because we're then going to have to think about what that means for the next step. But I think part of it, you're absolutely right. I think that will be part of what it does. We need to think carefully about indoors, outdoors.
Yeah.
The indoor gyms will be a problem for a bit longer than outdoor gyms. So they talked on the call last week amongst all these sports about getting gym equipment outdoors rather than in a non-ventilated, like we're used to, in a non-ventilated environment. That's much worse. The virus loves that. The virus loves that hot, poorly ventilated area, but it doesn't like the outdoors. Much easier to keep clean, much easier for everybody to distance, all of that. So I think you're right. I think there will be steps that Murrayfield, for instance, can do.
One question I have, I suppose it's of my own, but one issue potentially, Jason, with everybody living in this world where we are washing our hands so regularly, we're having no outside contact, it's what it does to suppressing our own immune system away from COVID-19. And then when we go back to some degree of normality, are we far more susceptible to pick up other infections, other diseases that could give a kind of false spike, a different spike?
Yeah, you're not. It's quite short in the terms of long-term disease. So you're not. In fact, we've seen a drop in colds and flus because everybody's finally washing their hands properly. So one of the pandemics are never good for you. There's never any suggestion a pandemic is a good thing. But one of the things that's come out of this is kids have learned to wash their hands, and grannies and grandpas have learned to wash their hands too. So the personal cleanliness has got better. That's why you can't buy wipes in the supermarkets. So there's definitely something better. We don't know what will happen to the flu season. And the flu season in the southern hemisphere will be interesting over the next few months because they start to get flu quite soon in Australia and New Zealand. And then it gets quite difficult because the symptoms become hard to distinguish because flu and COVID at the beginning look very similar, particularly in the ones who don't get really sick. So we'll have to be careful. And we're already thinking, would you believe, a call this morning about winter planning for the health service, because we do that every May. We think about what November, December, January will look like in the health service and how we manage that. So we're mindful of it, but you're not putting yourself at any risk.
Jason, one of the most common questions that we got coming in from our supporters and our fans was around when can I visit my extended family? Do you have any idea or any update of when people will be able to leave and maybe visit mum and dads, gran and grandpas or partners?
Not yet is my basic answer, and predictably. I think in the next few weeks, we would hope to be able to slightly adjust what that looks like. You can see in England that they've chosen that you can visit or be with one person from another household, but at a park and an outdoor space. So we will look at that very carefully. We only saw that document yesterday, and we will look at that and come up with our own version of what that might look like. Belgium have had an interesting example. Belgium have done what they call bubbles, where you can basically expand your household to one other household, but you don't have to live together. But now you are not allowed to see anybody else. So my mum and dad could choose me or my sister. I know they'd clearly choose me, but we wouldn't be able to see anybody else. So that's one thing we're thinking about. It adds risk because there's key workers in there. There's people at work. There's people out doing the shopping. So you've got to be careful, particularly for the shielded group, those who have had transplants or are having chemotherapy, or that very vulnerable group. But it may be that we do something along those lines, or we say that you can go visit, sit outside. There's a number of variables at play, and I'm hoping that in the next few weeks we'll be able to do that, because it's crucial there's all kinds of things that are really hard. So it's about the economics of the country, of course, but it's also about the society. It's about, so what do? Do you let grandchildren visit their granny, or do you open the cafes? Or, it's not quite as neat as that. But those are all the things we've got to consider about what goes first and what goes second.
One other byproduct of this, and as you say, there's never a positive, but we work very closely with BT, as you know. The tech that has come into everybody's world, even this podcast, which we're all doing remotely now, that has to have significant changes moving forward with how we work, how often you, for instance, or me go along that M8 or down to London or flying all over the world.
Yep.
It has to be. What's your opinion on how?
No, I completely agree. There's real important health changes in there as well. We've got a thing called and lots of the listeners will probably have used it in the last 6 weeks, called NHS Near Me. NHS Near Me is our electronic video conferencing for NHS visits. And we did, before the pandemic, we did 300 NHS Near Me visits a week. We had really just started using it. And now we're up to 30,000 a day. Wow. So it's unbelievable. So every GP practice, every general practice has got an NHS Near Me unit, and it's just a laptop, a secure connection, and you get your appointment, and you phone up, and a receptionist talks to you. So somebody in a call centre or in the GP practice says, "I'm just going to put you in the waiting room," and you wait. Dr. Jones or Nurse Mary is ready for you, and you go through. You have a video conference. It's absolutely fantastic. I was doing one when we launched it. I did the media for it, and I was talking to a gastroenterologist who had been using it, and he phoned the postman in Galsby, which is way north, and he was on his postman's round, no time off work, no big journey to Inverness or Aberdeen, and had his consultation in the van while on his round. And nobody had to take any time off work. It was absolutely perfect. The punchline of the story, unfortunately, is right at the end of the consultation, he lit up a fag in the van. And my pal, who's the gastroenterologist, said, "Are you smoking?" And he stubs out the cigarette really quickly. He says, "Oh, I forgot I was at the doctor."
There wouldn't be many cigarettes being lit up in a doctor's surgery before that one, I wouldn't think.
Brilliant. So it's really expanded. So so the NHS and social care will use it. We've also done it for visiting. So a lot of people are now doing virtual visiting of their relatives in care homes because we've had to close down a lot of the visiting for safety. So the iPads and computers and phones all being used for that.
One of the other questions we got back in from one of our fans was which Barbarian socks you would wear. So in essence, you pick your club, and you maybe mentioned it already. Now I will give you a couple of options because you have the ability to wear clearly two socks. So would you split it, or would you go?
So I need to know the rules. So forgive my slight ignorance. But so Pro 14 clubs can play for the Barbarians, or do I wear a Scotland sock, or do I?
So generally, you would wear your club socks. Now the way it works is you're selected. You then.
That's the first problem. That's very unlikely.
Right, let's go past that. We've spoken to the board of governors. You're in. What position? What's your chosen position?
Where is the least contact?
On the bench.
Probably on the wing.
Let's be a glory winger.
Yeah, it's a shame Chris Patterson's not here because he spent most of his career avoiding. I can say that because he's not here.
I'm with him.
You then choose one. So when I played, chose Alan Glenn's, my club from Bishopbriggs. So I wore an Alan Glenn sock. And I spent 9 years playing for Glasgow Warriors, so I wore an Alan Glenn sock and a Glasgow Warriors sock. Now I had represented. I was played at Edinburgh for 4 years. I played at Stirling County for a couple. So there are other clubs, but probably those were the two that had the biggest impact on me as my life and my rugby life. So, whose socks would you be wearing if you're playing?
So it's got to be the Warriors as my present club,
nice.
Kind of my fan club. But I think I'd have to. Airdrie Academy had a former pupils team, not the Airdrie Academy team was awful. But the former pupils team actually did quite well. So I think I'd have Airdrie Academy former pupils on one foot and Warriors on the other. Does that get me in?
That gets you in. That's as good as it gets. Now, one other question, which might be slightly harder to answer, but Glasgow Warriors are playing against Edinburgh in 1872 and the kick-off's 3 o'clock on a Saturday. And Airdrie are playing against St Mirren at the same time. Which game are you going to?
So I honestly, I'm going to the Rugby because Airdrie's nearly killed me so many times. Did
you tell the boys in Off the Ball a different answer?
I tell you, no, I'd give them the same answer because they've given me so much hope over the years and then completely dashed it. And it just breaks your heart when you're brought up from 7 years old that you just can't take it anymore. So there's something about the slightly kinder atmosphere of Glasgow, Edinburgh that I would choose, I think. And my dad likes the pies better than he does at Broomfield.
Well, we hope that you can get your dad to along to a game at Scotston in the not too distant future. But we really appreciate you coming on and sharing such great information with us and for the rest of the supporters and the listeners out there.
We all know this is changing on a daily basis, so it'll be brilliant to get you back on maybe in a couple of weeks to give us a further update if you're up for that. Brilliant. Anytime. Professor Jason Leitch, Clinical Director for Scottish Government. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak to you soon. Well, joining us now on the podcast is Jim Mallinder. Jim, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
I need to ask, Mossy and Al, before Jim arrived at Scottish Rugby, you were obviously aware of him, but what was your relationship like? Did you know him? Do you know him well?
I see he's right there. We better not tell him.
Put you in the spot, eh?
My memories of Jim were Glasgow when Jim was coaching at Northampton. It was Glasgow and Northampton games in Europe. I remember we sat in a press conference together because we had you guys in the group stages. And myself and Gregor were down. So it can't have been all that long ago because Gregor was coaching Glasgow. We went down there and we did all right. I think we did all right. I can't remember. I think we did a poor first half and then a better second half, or vice versa. Yeah. And then we won the game at Scotstoun. But by that stage we were out. I remember getting grumpy actually in that game because everybody started celebrating because we scored a brilliant try at the end and everybody celebrating under the posts. And it was the only game we'd won. And I ended up getting grumpy with Pete Horn, going like, why are we celebrating? We've not done anything in the rest of the tournament, but that was just me being an old grumpy man.
You sounded like me, Al. It used to be you that get grumpy. No, I remember Jim as a player. I remember watching Jim as a player and watching the kind of development at Sale all the way through. I'm a bit older than you guys, obviously. And then obviously coaching at Sale, coaching at Northampton, being involved with the under-20s and the Saxons with England. So always aware of just how genuine a rugby bloke Jim was. And when I saw the appointment coming through, I thought it's a really good appointment with so much rugby nous and experience. So looking forward to gaining as much as we can from you, Jim. I'll take you back to playing fullback.
That is a long time ago.
Does it feel like a long time ago?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you miss it?
No. No. I get sore if I've done a day's gardening, let alone play a rugby match anymore. Yeah, I do miss it. What I do miss, I miss being with the lads. And I guess coaching was close to that, really, as close you can get by being a coach of a team. But there's nothing better to me than used to be for playing 80 minutes of rugby with your teammates and then going have a drink and socialising afterwards. To me, you can't beat that.
And Sale at that time had a real journey. You were part of the Sale journey, from the kind of amateur days right through to the professional days as a player, and then latterly as a coach, winning premierships and winning. There was a real transition at the club. Was that a kind of consequence of professional rugby, or was it a real drive from Sale to improve and make a difference?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both, to be honest. Sale was always one of the big teams in the north. You know, you sort of had your Headingleys, your Waterloos, your Orals, and Sale were one of those teams. Fortunately, I guess the people in charge had a little bit of a foresight in terms of wanting to keep developing, growing the club. And I was, as you say, really, really lucky because I went there as an amateur player. I was a teacher at the time. I moved from Yorkshire, where I'd been to college and school. I moved over to Manchester just literally because of the job. And because of the job, then I went down to Sale, went down to Haywood Road, the little ground where they play. I just basically turned up on a Tuesday night with my bag and said I'd like to play at the weekend. And I did play through the grades, really, through the sort of, I started with the third team and I worked my way up to the first team. So it wasn't, there's no big draft system, there's no transfer fees or somebody going, you're magnificent, come and play for us. It was start with the lads, with the third team and build your way through the teams. And I love that. And
you obviously built up to play international rugby out of Sale as well. 2 caps for England. And when was it, 97?
Yeah, 97. So I was at the good old age of 31. So very, very fortunate that the British Lions were touring at that same time. Took most of the best players. There were a few left over who were probably injured or couldn't be bothered to go out to Argentina. So I got the call. Jack Rowell was the manager / head coach. Really interesting bloke. Les Cusworth was the backs coach. And we went out there and played 2 tests.
just to go back to your time at Sale, Jim, obviously where that club is based in the north of England, there's obviously there's a real desire for rugby league there as well. Was rugby league something that you played or were interested in growing up as well?
Yeah, so I actually went. I was born in Halifax. Played for Crossleys, which was a school. Started playing at 11. Played for a team there called Old Crossleans, which is where Brian Moore was. He was probably 3 years older than I. So same school, same junior rugby club. And that was very, very much a rugby league area. Used to play at Thrum Hall in Halifax. So yeah, surrounded by both codes really. But I went to a rugby union playing school and hence played union.
The transition, Jim, out of playing. So you gone from playing into coaching and into this kind of director of rugby role, which I suppose is more of an overview, less on-field coaching, I assume. Now, is that all quite a smooth transition, or where are the big learning points that you had to step back and realise that you had a bit to gather?
No, it was. It's definitely not been smooth. But it's been a good journey, and I've just been so honoured really to have been able to do it. As I say, I love playing amateur rugby. I'll just go back and say it again, because I just used to love playing and socialising. The bus coming home, having a few beers. I remember Haywood Road, the clubhouse. Got so many friends who I see now irregularly. We don't meet up enough, but when we meet up, we're so close, talking about some of the games that we played, some of the characters involved, just having a couple of pints, well, sometimes there's a few more than a couple of pints after a game, which was tremendous. But then I've been fortunate to go through to the professional time, so the semi-professional, I was delighted because I was then a teacher, but I was actually getting paid. So I used to get up in the morning and train because I wanted to, but actually now I was getting paid to do that. So that was a massive bonus to go to the gym and get paid for it and to play rugby. Then went into professional, which was great. I actually went professional when I think I was 30, and my thoughts were, right, this will probably last maybe 2-3 years maximum, but why not do it for 2 or 3 years and I'll go back and be a teacher for the rest of my life.
So that was the thought, that the teaching would still be there and you'd go back and step back into it?
Absolutely. That was the thought. It certainly wasn't, I want to be a professional coach or director of rugby or performance director that I'm doing now.
So when did it change? Because you went from those 2 years as a pro to a head coach in a professional team. So during that transition, did the penny drop, or did you just get hooked, or did you at some point think, actually, now is the time to stay? I do want to coach. I do want to.
With a profession behind you, that must be an even harder decision than it is maybe for some of the guys now, because they'll go straight from studying or straight from school into professional rugby. It's all they've known. But you're of the generation that had that profession. Not only did you have the profession, you've been working in it for a good number of years. So that must have been a very, very difficult decision to make.
It was, but it was a natural decision in a way, because I was player coach at Sale as I got into my sort of late 20s. John Mitchell came over, to be honest. It was firstly Paul Turner, don't know if you remember, a little Merculian Welsh fly half, played a few caps. He's done quite a lot of coaching around the
Dragons as well, wasn't he, latterly?
That's right, correct. So he was quite influential. Then John Mitchell came. He took over as head coach, and I, in a way, coached the backs as well as playing. And I think part of that was because of my teaching background. It was quite a natural thing to do, to stand up in front of the lads and, in a way, help organise, help coach them. And then John Mitchell moved on. I think he went to Wasps and he went to join Clive Wood with England, with the first team. And so I just naturally moved into the role. I was asked whether I wanted to do it, didn't really sort of think about it, and went then from being head coach to then sort of like a director of rugby.
You've had so many experiences that even in the short 2 or 3 minutes we've spoken about already, that you can apply in your new role. You know, you've got the semi-professional element, which you could align almost to some of your experiences to help the Super Six. You've got the amateur element that you could rub off on rugby development. And obviously the professional experience and the a couple of big clubs in England as well as being in the system of the RFU. So with all this kind of experience, where do you think you'll try and make the immediate impact in Scottish rugby?
Good question, Moss.
Very good question. I'd like to think it's just not going to be in one place. I think it's, as your question quite rightly said, over a number of different areas. And I do have a massive interest in development because of my school background, but I have been involved with the RFU, with the academies. I've always been, wherever we were at Sale, at Saints, Northampton Saints, really, really keen on developing not just players, because we want players to come through the system, they're important, but also coaches as well. So really, really interested in getting our best young coaches up to speed, and really if we can bring them through the system as well. I guess I've also been fortunate that I've been a player and a coach and now a bit more of an administrator, but I've had a young son as well who's come through the system fairly recently. So he's been in the academies, come through school, the academy system, playing a little bit of age group rugby, and now being a young professional player. So I guess, I'm hearing what he's saying. Quite interesting during these periods in terms of the uncertainties over furloughing, over the cuts. It's sort of applying across the board, and it's good to have that close contact, I guess, with people.
Jim, you would have had a reasonable amount of knowledge of rugby in Scotland from playing against the teams up here as well as coaching against them. But what's been the standout for you so far in the months that you've been in? Is there anything that's taken you a bit by surprise?
What I've enjoyed is I've enjoyed looking at, first of all, the academy system, and I've watched the under-20s really, really closely. So I watched all those games, and I was disappointed that we lost some of those close games, really close against England, close against France, and there were games that I thought we could have easily won. And what really impressed me was the way that the team played together. So, clearly we've got some good individuals. We don't have the strength in depth that, say, south of the border, England or France have, but we've certainly got some very, very good players in the system. And what I was impressed was how the coaches and the management pull those together. And I guess that applies throughout, really, up to the seniors, really. I've been watching Glasgow and Edinburgh in that first couple of months. So really enjoying watching them and their progress, working with the head coaches a little bit behind the scenes, particularly for next season, planning for next season. And then, of course, the first team, the seniors, Gregor, working with him and the coaching staff. And I've enjoyed the rugby that they've been playing in the internationals in those Six Nations. And I really do think there's been some progress there in terms of the way that they're developing and playing.
If we start with the 20s, Jim, I was at the games as well and worked with the lads. And you mentioned the England and France game, the game at Myerside and the game at Netherdale. You're right, it could have been 2 wins. Probably dominated a lot of the areas of the game against England, certainly territory, certainly possession. And then against France, I saw them actually figuring out how to adapt to the strengths of the French team. Both games, they put themselves in a position to win, but didn't quite go over the line. Do you think it was a kind of psychological thing or a belief thing? Because they certainly had a lot of knowledge and a lot of ability. I just wonder, from you coming in, do you think they truly believed that they could get over the line?
Yeah, I think that's probably something in there. But I also think there's probably also something in the bit of a strength in depth. And I know that England team pretty well because I was involved with it the year before. And what I do know is that they've got good strength in depth, and they can quite easily lose 3 or 4 tight heads, for example, and they'll just go and churn out another tight head from somewhere else. In Scotland, it's not that easy, and I do know that we had a number of injuries in a couple of positions, and therefore just made us slightly weak and in certain areas. And I guess sometimes then that puts doubt in your coaches' minds in terms of when do we get players on. Whereas if you're in a strong position with a strong bench, you're thinking, right, after 45, 50 minutes, we're going to add and make a real impact. And then sometimes it's a question of, do we need to keep our 15 on the field and hold out because we're actually playing pretty well and we could win this? Do we keep the players on a little bit too long? And of course, opposition bring their fresh bench on, and that makes a difference. Very, very difficult decisions. And I've been in that decision-making process as head coach, and it's not easy.
And conversely, 2 really good wins away from home. I thought the performance first up in Ireland was strong as well, and a difficult Wednesday night against a strong Irish team. And then to win in Italy, which we haven't done for a long time, against Italy, who I think had beaten Wales already and run France close, I think, in the first 2 games. But the icing on the cake was the final game, wasn't it, down at Galway Bay with the big win against Wales. We saw there that the ability, and I think, contradicting my last question, really, there was the belief that you could go and really play some quality rugby.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think probably the Italy question answered that a little bit as well. Yeah. Because speaking to Conor O'Shea beforehand, who was understood what was coming through, he said that Italy side was their best side coming through for a number of years. And as you say, they played pretty well in some other games. But I think for us to go down there, play well, it was very, very close towards the end. But we actually then had the mental and the physical capabilities to hold on there. I think it was brilliant for the lads. And then that final game down in Wales, terrific to go away. And Wales, we know, are always, strong at age group level. To go down there and really win quite convincingly was very impressive.
Jim, you mentioned the strength and depth, and yourself and rugby development will be working incredibly hard to get as many people with the ball in their hand as possible. 1, because it's such a phenomenal sport, and 2, because the byproduct of that will be, ideally, there'll be more people coming into the kind of top end of the game. But putting that to one side, one advantage that we undoubtedly have, which is sometimes overlooked, is the fact that we are a small country, and that people like yourself, like Mossy as well, can get so much time with the vast majority of players all within a kind of hour and a half's travel of each other. You can get that one-on-one time with the players, whether it's under 20s coming through or the top guys playing international rugby for the women or the men's team. How big a part is that going to be for you to make sure that you can get out there as much as possible and have those conversations?
Yeah, I think very important. I think what you said is so true. It's fantastic having everybody close. I've not got around enough at this moment in time. Before the lockdown, I was only here for a couple of months, so I've not got across to the Glasgow side enough. So I'm really looking forward to going over there. I've been around Edinburgh, I've watched them quite a few times. I'm looking forward to watching Super 6 as well, and some of the other club rugby, because that's really, really important. And in terms of developing these players, we talked about the academy and bringing them through. They need a competition which is as close to the top level as we possibly can. So we need to really, really encourage things like the Super 6 to get our best young players. That's more than academy. It's these youngsters who are young 20s, and from front 5 players in particular, quite a lot take time to develop. And we need a competition where we can see them playing and developing.
Jim, another part of your remit, I guess, will be around the women's game as well. Now, unfortunately, the women's didn't really get much of a go this year in the Six Nations, just with regards to fixtures. But we've got a great new head coach in there with the women. But what's it like for you to spread your knowledge around the women's game as well?
Yeah, it's good. And again, I don't think I certainly haven't had a massive impact on the women's game as yet. I'm just understanding it. I'm working with Gemma Fay and with Stevie Gemmell, who are really more hands-on there. But I do think it's a massive area of the game. Again, I know from looking at France and looking at England, they're probably further ahead in terms of numbers of players. However, I've seen the games, even though we got quite a lot postponed. I saw the 2 games that they played, and particularly the Ireland game. I thought they played really, really well, and you can see the coach's input into the game. You can see we got a pretty strong set piece. Our scrum and our line-out more went well. Clearly, we've got a good defensive organisation, and we look good with ball in hand as well. So, in terms of the game, It's difficult because we've got a lot of amateur players, but we want to encourage the game to grow in Scotland, which I think we can do. We can't rush it because a lot of our top players are involved sometimes with 7s and 15s. And I think particularly over this really short period of time where we're looking to play some rearranged games, we've got things like qualifications for World Cups and for Olympics, lots going on. But I think it's a big area, and hopefully we can get some real growth in the women's game.
And you mentioned earlier on around you spent some time with Edinburgh, and you're looking to spend some more time with Glasgow. Just talk with maybe a little bit more around your role. What will you be working with Glasgow and Edinburgh on?
Most recently, it's been working with the with both clubs really in terms of the furloughing and the cuts, and trying to give a message, trying to get the players, keep them up to date as much as possible. So we do work with RPS. So everything that we're doing, we try to, make the players aware as much as we possibly can. There's lots of work going on with Richard Cockrell and Danny Wilson at the moment in terms of getting squads, recruitment right for next season. There's a little bit of a freeze at the moment for obvious reasons. Most of the squad is in place for next season, but we've just got a little bit of finalising that we'd like to do. So again, that's an ongoing process and conversations that we're having.
And how much do you enjoy that process of maybe recruitment? You were a head coach, so you would have looked at players all the time, and you would have brought in players different seasons to try and bolster squads. Do you enjoy that process of trying to find these unknown players?
Yeah, no, it's great to be involved in. Again, it's different to director of rugby. You make that final decision. At Glasgow and Edinburgh, those head coaches, they're the ones who are driving it. What I see my job is a little bit working with Gregor. Is just that person in the background who can hopefully make some, just help them, talk about my experiences. I will have a look at the players and see how I think they could fit into what we've already got here.
Now, we're structured slightly different up here, Jim, and Scottish Rugby only the 2 pro teams. And to your point there are central resource, including yourself and Gregor, who will have that overview of everything that's going on. How different is that to what you've been used to down south? And has that been difficult to get used to, or do you imagine it will be difficult to get used to moving forward?
Yeah, it is quite difficult, because I think when you're director of rugby of a Premiership club, you really you responsible. You're accountable to the board, and that's it really. And so you make a lot of decisions along with your coaching staff. This is a little bit slightly different in terms of the union and the 2 pro teams working together. We've got MDs there as well who we're also communicating with. But I think it's a good setup, and I think if we use it positively, then it'll work for us. Clearly, we want to concentrate on Scottish qualified players, and mainly those. We want them playing in Scotland as much as we possibly can. I guess in an ideal world, we'd have another team, a 3rd franchise, because 2 does limit us. There's only a certain number of tight heads or second rows or hookers that we can get playing at a top level, and sometimes we need opportunities for other people. But I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, particularly in terms of what's happening with the pandemic. So, it's good. It's a good system, and hopefully I can help towards making it better.
You can really hear your passion for the club rugby, how much it meant to you, how much it still means to you, Jim, as well. And the Super Six is going to be a big part of that. And Scotland, you've mentioned, looking to help fuel the professional teams, as well as help the individuals who want to play in that Super Six. The other area that's vital important in world rugby, sevens, and I know you've got a passion for sevens as well, and you'll be keen to watch the sevens team and help the sevens team and players develop as well.
Yeah, I think it's another great tool we can use. As I say, just having the 2 pro teams and Scotland under 20s, the sevens is very, very useful for us. And I've seen quite a lot of the tournaments that they've been playing in. Stevie Gemmell and I keep in constant touch and contact with Kieran, the coach, Kieran Beattie, and it's a great opportunity. We've got some good young players there. We've got some professionals who are, relatively experienced. Quite a few who are actually experienced at playing sevens, have been there on the circuit. But then we've got some other lads who coming in to help. And what we see is it's a massive tool for 15s. Clearly, sevens is a slightly different game, but in terms of some of the positions, back row, the backs, some of the core skills that we can introduce and help develop, very, very important. And it's been good for us and hopefully will be in the future.
Did you play?
I did play all amateur, mainly at Easter on a Sunday after I'd played the day before. So I played, but quite badly. I was a prop. Yeah, didn't enjoy propping, must admit.
What was worse, propping or catching kickoffs as a forward in sevens? What's worse?
Yeah, actually, I didn't mind the catching of kickoffs, but actually, when we used to play, they weren't very accurate. People used just to hoop the ball down. Today, it's a lot more. You've got to get under it, don't you? And
it was less one-man lifts in those days, I suppose. But we've spoken about the sevens a lot on this podcast, and I agree with just how vitally important it is for players' development. We've said that the only thing, in my opinion, it doesn't really provide is set-piece experience. The physical, the mental attributes are there, the skill level, just the ability to repeat under pressure, under stress. You're also playing in front of crowds, so you're dealing with that exposure to the big moments, and you're totally exposed with fewer players in the field. So I agree. I think it's so important for players to develop, and we have developed players through the sevens, and I think we'll develop more in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just with our system, hopefully, we can get that transition between the two as well. And, going away, playing a few sevens competitions and then coming back and then getting stuck into have a section playing for the 15s as well. Again, it's all about opportunities and the playing calendar. It's something we've got to really work at, looking at the players and looking at their playing opportunities.
And just on the Scotland Sevens, Sean Lamont is part of the S&C team for Scotland Sevens, and also he was down at Northampton Saints, which must have been one of your signings then. I think 2005. Did he come down, Jim?
Yeah, well done. Good
knowledge, Jamie.
Good knowledge, very good knowledge. He actually was there when I arrived. So yeah, outstanding player, really, really quality. And he's doing an excellent job on the sevens. I think to have somebody with his rugby experience, but clearly now his involvement and knowledge of S&C, I think that's a really useful help to the coaches, because it's only a small management team. So when you've got somebody who loves their S&C, but also understands the rugby side as well, it's very useful.
I suppose the more we chat, the more we find out how many close links or knowledge you have around the Scottish game. I was thinking, you mentioned your son Harry, who plays professionally and has been involved with the England age grade sides. I distinctly remember him playing against under-20s teams that include Jamie Ritchie, Xander Fagerson, Adam Hastings, Blair Kinghorn. So you'll have coached against these guys, and you've also got a son who's played against them. So your knowledge of Scottish rugby it gets deeper.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. To be honest, it's one of the reasons I took the job, because my involvement has always been England. So I do know England very, very well, all the way through the system, coaching up to England Saxons. So I know that very well. So it's been great for me to step out, to go somewhere else. Slightly different players, but a knowledge of them. We were talking about, when I first went down to Northampton, but a certain Tommy Smith was the loose head when I arrived down at Northampton. Late for every meeting. I won't start going into any more stories. I'm sure you've heard enough about Tommy Smith, but great bloke. So yes, I've got knowledge of a lot of the Scotland setup. Good.
And would you have played with Brian Redpath at Sale and Rowan Shepherd back then as well? Are these all names you'll be familiar with?
Absolutely. So very close with Brian Redpath, yes, it's at Sale. So I still speak to him very regularly. Rowan Shepherd, I actually brought down to to Sale, apologies, as a number 10, but he got injured fairly quickly into it. but he became he did the analysis for us and did some coaching and was really, really useful down there for a number of years. So yeah, some close links with those people.
My timings might be a little bit later here. I don't know if it was the same time, but my idol growing up was Budge Pountney. Was he involved with Northampton when you were there, or was that just before you, Jim?
Yeah, so he was just before. So Budge was a player before, went on to start coaching. I think Paul Grayson himself then took over for a while, but he just left when I arrived. So I know Budge, but we weren't there at the same time.
Is that who you modelled your game on, Jamie?
Probably was, yeah. I was a big fan, yeah.
He's tough as old boots, Budge. I remember playing a lot with Budge. He was as hard as they come. Proper 7 scavenger back row. You do well if you emulated him, Jamie.
We're just touching on the link between Northampton Saints and Scotland. There's a lot of names there, but one in particular who's been given a chance in recent years is Rory Hutchinson. What's your thoughts on him, Jim, and how much involvement did you have with him back in the day?
Yeah, I've known Rory a long time. He was actually the same age as Harry, my son. So I've seen him come through, sort of playing very early for Northampton age groups, academy coming through, and he's somebody who I think has just got better. He's been really good the last 2 seasons. Attacking wise. He can play second receiver. He's got a lovely passing game off both hands, lovely smooth runner, really improving, working on his defensive game and his contact side of it. So, great to see him come forward and becoming an international player. And I'm looking forward to seeing him hopefully develop and kicking on even more.
And you mentioned your son Harry. Two questions. How is he finding the whole situation just now, and what's he doing to keep himself in shape? And second, for you, Jim, is as a coach, it's tough, but how hard is it to coach family, particularly your boy who you obviously want to kick on and do well?
To answer the first question, he's well, thank you. He lives on his own. He lives with a mate of his. So I think they've been very busy. I say busy, they've not been busy, but he's what they all do. Got the home gym inside the house, and he has pinched my road bike. So he's out on that every day. Left me having to walk around everywhere. Good old dad. But no, he's well. In terms of second question, what's it like to coach? It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. Selection. Very, very awkward. You've really got to rely on your other coaches to sort of help you make those decisions. But it's something that I enjoy doing, but actually it's something now I can step away from. Being involved in Scottish rugby is fantastic for me, loving every minute of that, and it's then nice to see him doing his own thing in the Premiership.
Also brilliant to get Jim Mallinder on the podcast. I know he's only been in the role since January, but he made the announcement, I think, last August. And it's a difficult time for anybody to come into an organisation. But I think what we all agree on is the fact that it's great to have somebody who clearly just has a love for the game of rugby. I mean, he talks about his amateur days very fondly. That would be great for not just only Scottish rugby, but clubland in particular, won't it?
Yeah, it comes across really well, Jim. He's got a huge amount of knowledge in so many different areas of the game. We said that in the interview, and it came across hopefully so well. And the fact that he's lived through amateur rugby, it's a big. You can see it's a big part of his personality, really. And he's played as a semi-pro. He's played as a pro. He's coached as a head coach. He's been a director of rugby. He's been involved at a national level. He's been involved with a lot of our players. He's coached against them. He's been involved and coached, played with a lot of Scottish rugby characters that we spoke about. The other guys, Ewan Murray was another one. You've got Jason White, who I done last week on the Crabbies changing room chat. Was one of Jim's signings at Sale. Barry Stewart. I mean, there's so many connections, and what came across for me was just how much knowledge Jim has in terms of obviously what he's gleaned in English rugby, but of Scottish rugby, and that I think is a really good mix. And his personality and his drive towards making a difference. There'll be some tough decisions to make, obviously, but he's had a lot of experience of making those tough decisions as head coach and as director of rugby.
Yeah, the breadth to that experience is a key. Like, he's been involved in so many parts of the game that he can then come up, clean set of eyes, and look at what's going on at the Scottish Rugby. And mostly to your point about the tough decisions, he doesn't strike me as a guy, and known him a little bit in the past when he was coaching. He won't shy away from those. Like, he's passionate, and a spade's a spade with him. I think when you look at the group of young coaches as well as young players that we've got involved, they will only benefit from us having Jim Mallinder involved in it. Like, I thought he was brilliant there. To hear the journey that he's been on, that stepping away from teaching, you can see the teacher in him, you can hear the teacher in him. But again, that's a massive positive, the way he communicates with people. So yeah, I'm excited about what he can do over the next few years.
I think he was a PE teacher, but he taught maths as well, I think. I remember properly going down memory lane here, but when I studied PE teaching, Scotland was the only country where you could do a PE teaching degree on its own. If you studied in England, in any of the universities in England, you had to align it to maths or geography. So, as you say, you can see the teacher in him, you can see the PE teacher, but you can probably also see the maths teacher in him as well.
I studied maths at university myself, Mossy.
Did you, Al?
Yeah. All known fact. I did. I finished as much as I needed to. I did 2 years. I should have asked him for some help. I was doing homeschooling for my daughter this morning on her maths.
What did you get stuck on?
Everything. we were doing turning fractions into percentages.
Oh no, the improper fraction again. No. Were we talking improper fractions? Well, I was. Well, I think I was. I was getting it all wrong. But
she had the audacity yesterday. Said, "I can't be bothered," or something along those lines, and she got the full. I mean, I was having a day. I was like, "We do not say that. I need help. I'm finding this difficult. All fine. I can't be bothered. It's not happening at this home school."
That's all from us here on the official Scottish Rugby podcast. Thank you once again for listening. As always, we'll be back next week with more exclusive content.